In the church here, we have been looking at the Gospel of Mark, and we're going to continue that series. We're going to continue the series until the end of June, and that will be completed after that. So we've been looking at journey through Mark, and today we're going to read from Mark chapter 9. We will break the series next week, because next week is Pentecost Sunday, and I thought we should recognize that. I also realize that probably somewhere in the thing they call the calendar of the church, this Sunday is maybe Ascension Sunday. But I had forgotten about that. So we're not going to break to do that today. Instead, we're going to pick up another theme that does appear in the church calendar, but somewhere about February. And this is because we're in a free church tradition. That means we do what we want with the church calendar, which at times is scandalous, but hopefully we cover it as we go through. So the reading is from Mark chapter 9, and I'm going to read from verses 2 to 8. Although there is more to the story after 8, there is a natural break at verse 8. Reading from verse 2. After 6 days, Jesus took Peter, James, and John. They were regarded almost as an inner circle of disciples. Jesus took Peter, James, and John with him and led them up a high mountain where they were all alone. There, he, that being Jesus, was transfigured before them. His clothes became dazzling white, whiter than anyone in the world could bleach them. And there appeared before them Elijah and Moses, who were talking with Jesus. Peter said to Jesus, "Rabbi, it is good for us to be here. Let us put up 3 shelters, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah." He didn't know what to say because he was so frightened. Then a cloud appeared and covered them, and a voice came from the cloud, "This is my son whom I love. Listen to him." Suddenly, when they looked around, they no longer saw anyone with them except Jesus. Bleached, whiter than bleached cloth. It seemed as though for a moment a veil was pulled away and they saw Jesus shining, radiant, whiter than bleached cloth. And from a cloud, the canopy of the Spirit, a voice spoke. "This is my Son, whom I love. Listen to him." There is a story in the Old Testament that goes something like this. Once upon a time, there was a man of God. That was how they referred to him, as a man of God. And this man of God was helping the people of Israel. And he helped the people of Israel escape from their enemies. And the way in which he helped the people of Israel escape from their enemies is that they would tell the people of Israel where the enemy army was camped. As a consequence, the people of Israel could simply avoid them. "Why," asked the king of Aram, "why do the people of Israel keep escaping from us?" His officials said to him, "Well, they have a man of God, a prophet, who is helping them." "Right," he said, "I want you to find him and capture him." And so it was, one morning, Elisha wakens up. In the city in which he is surrounded, Elisha, the prophet, the man of God, wakens up, and the city is surrounded by an army, a large force, including chariots and horses. His servant comes in to see him. "Sir," he says, "we are surrounded by these enemies." And Elisha says, "Don't worry, the people with us are far greater than the people with them." It doesn't tell us what the servant thinks, but it goes like this, "Don't think so." And Elisha seems to know this, and so he prays, "Open his eyes that he may see." And the servant looks, and he sees that which he had not seen before. because in the hills surrounding the city, ready to protect Elisha, are the army of God with horses and chariots of fire. Sometimes it seems that we need some seeing to help our believing. Whiter than bleached cloth. It seemed as though for a moment the veil was torn apart and they saw Jesus shining, radiant, whiter than bleached cloth. And from a cloud, the canopy of the Spirit, a voice speaks and says, "This is my Son, who I love. Listen to him." This event that we read about today in Mark chapter 9, this event we call in the language of the church the Transfiguration. That was a word that was made up. It comes from the Latin, but it was made up to describe this particular event. It was made up to try and translate the Greek word metamorphosis, from which we get our word metamorphosis, and which we use to describe such things as what happens when a caterpillar becomes a butterfly. But that didn't seem a good enough description, and therefore we have the word transfiguration. So this event, which we call the Transfiguration in the church, is an event that happens at a very important point in the Gospel of Mark. It's an important point in the life of the first disciples, but it's also an important point in the Gospel of Mark when people will read it later, because we're just a bit past halfway through. We're now starting the second section in the Gospel of Mark. And it seems that we've reached a point in the story where the disciples are trying to work out in their mind whether Jesus is the one who could be trusted to lead their party forward. That can be quite disturbing. Let me strip that back a little. If you've ever watched a TV program such as Lion's Den, or to some extent The Apprentice, two programs I hate with a godly zeal. But if you've ever watched any of these programs, you'll be familiar with the idea of a start-up. A start-up is an emerging business or an emerging social enterprise. And I think it's important for us to remember when we read the stories in the Gospel of Mark that the thing that we call the church was only a start-up. It was a fledgling, groundbreaking, growth-orientated religious movement that was seeking to offer people a new way of belonging, of believing, and behaving. In the marketplace of religious and political ideas, the church was a new product. And the founder of this start-up, the young founder, innovative founder, was a man called Jesus of Nazareth. As a traveling rabbi, which is what he's called in the passage, he was a disruptor. He went against the status quo, he challenged the way things were, and he put his own views of the kingdom of God into action. He was a positive disruptor because he was motivated by the value of love. And motivated by the value of love, his goal was to make space in God's kingdom. His goal was to make space in God's kingdom a place of God's rule and God's harmony. And he wanted to make that space present, and he wanted to make it life-giving, and he wanted to make it accessible to everyone. Thus, Jesus from Nazareth would confront the powers, whether the powers would be spiritual or whether they would be human. He welcomed those traditionally excluded, in the Bible called tax collectors and sinners. He gave people back not merely their health, but he gave them back their dignity, especially women. He offered the forgiveness of sins even to people that didn't ask for it. He prioritized helping and healing over the keeping of strict Sabbath laws. He taught as though he knew what he was talking about, and he delivered parables of subversive speech, and he made such scandalous claims as it's easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich person to enter the kingdom of heaven. Such disruption brought opposition, barricades of resistance, and allegiances of antagonism. and threats on his life. Threats on his life. But this innovator, this beat poet of religion, took that and told people that the very service, suffering, and sacrifice that he was about to make was the very thing that would lead to the way of life and victory and transformation. And throughout the Gospel of Mark, his message was, turn around, believe the good news, for the kingdom of God is near. For the early adopters of this, the first disciples, I'm sure at times this was exhilarating. But when you read the Gospel of Mark, most of the time it was frightening, it was bewildering, and it's confusing. Even in our passage, Peter, who we are told doesn't know what to say, says something and gets it wrong. He clearly had never been to the school of, if you know nout, say nout. Instead, he decided if he knew nout, he was going to say something. And it was wrong. He took the wrong approach. His approach wasn't wrong in a scandalous way. He tried to do the right thing. He was trying to work out what was happening, but he wasn't right in what was happening. And at this point, in the unfolding story, the unspoken and sometimes nearly spoken question that the disciples are now having is, should we stick with this? Should we stick with him? I don't think this was a question as to whether or not they believed. You know, most people, I think, don't give up in church because they stop believing. Sometimes they give up in church because they have questions that the church scandalously fails to address or answer. But on the other side, sometimes folk just give up in church because it's no longer convenient. It no longer fits into our lives. It no longer satisfies us in what we thought it would do. And it becomes like one of the many activities in which we take part in. In fact, at times is one of the easiest ones to give up on. I don't know what was motivating the disciples at this point, but it seems to me, and I'll justify this in a minute, it seems to me that they had reached this point. They were no longer sure at all of who he was, and they were no longer sure whether, in fact, they should follow him. And then they have this moment of seeing. On the mountaintop, they see Moses and Elijah. Moses, the lawgiver, Elijah, a prophet, but it's not about them. The whole point is he's greater than them. And it is as if for only a moment a veil was pulled back. And they see Jesus, radiant, shining, whiter than bleached cloth. And from a cloud, the canopy of the Spirit, a voice speaks, "This is my Son, listen to him." In these words, we hear the problem that is being addressed. It's a question of identity and a question of obedience. In these words, we have a revelation and we have an expectation. The revelation is, this is my Son. The expectation is, you should listen to him. In these words, we have an indicative and an imperative. The indicative is, this is my Son, whom I love. The imperative is, therefore, you should listen to him. To put that more simply, the voice from the cloud is saying, keep following him. Stick with the disruptor. Live with the innovation. Walk in the way of Jesus of Nazareth. Walk in the path of challenging the powers that threaten life. Walk in the path of welcoming the outsider. Walk in the path of standing up for healing and dignity. Walk in the path of extending forgiveness. Walk in the path of speaking alternative views. Continue to invite others to turn and believe the good news, because this one, this Jesus of Nazareth, is the Son of God. Well, my. We as a congregation, as you know, have been making our journey through Mark. Can you push on to the next couple of slides, please? And one again. Thank you. We're making our journey through Mark, and we're doing it under two subheadings. One subheading is a wild Messiah for a missional church, and the other subheading is remaking the church in the founder's mission. These are both subtitles from two versions of the book, Re Jesus, by the writers Frost and Hirsch. Re Jesus. The writer Frank Lutz says re words are powerful words because they invite us to take the best of the past and to apply them into the future. And the challenge of the book, Re Jesus, for congregations is to allow Jesus of Nazareth, the wild Messiah, the founder of the church, who we read about in the Gospels, to shape and to reshape us as a congregation time and time again in keeping with his values, his interests, and in his way. Drawing from a book called What Would Jesus Deconstruct? Jesus is the inner force of the church, the uncontainable truth who should cause everything to tremble. He is the truth that will set us free, but he is truth spelled T-R-O-U-B-L-E, and to set us free, he may well have to turn us upside down. He is the fire we are invited to play with, but if we are going to play with fire, we need to be ready to be burned. Why would we do this? Why would anyone do this? Because for a moment, maybe the veil was pulled back and we see Jesus shining, radiant, and we hear a voice from heaven that says, "This is my Son. Listen to him." In these words, we are taken to a mountain in Galilee, but we are also taken to the end of time. For at the end of our Gospels, in the book of Revelation, a man called John, was it the same John, had a vision. It's a vision of the end of all things. And John, the writer of the book, looks and he sees 7 golden lampstands. And then, Revelation 1, reading from verse 14, among the lampstands was someone like a son of man, dressed in a robe, reaching down to his feet with a golden sash around his chest. The hair on his head was white like wool, as white as snow, and his eyes were like a blazing fire. His feet were bronze, glowing in a furnace, and his voice was like the sound of rushing waters. In his right hand he held 7 stars, and coming out of his mouth was a sharp, double-edged sword. His face was like the sun, shining in all of its brilliance. And when I saw him, I fell on my feet as though dead, and he put his hand on me and said, "Do not be afraid. I am the first and the last. I am the living one. I was dead, and now look, I am alive forever, and I hold the keys of death and hell." But then, on that mountaintop in Galilee, in verse 8, we are told, suddenly, when they looked around, they no longer saw anyone with them except Jesus. Sandals and all. I added that bit. No Moses, no Elijah, no radiance, no cloud, simply Jesus, the young, innovative disruptor from Nazareth. There may be times in our life when we have experiences of seeing to help our believing, but a lot of the time we're simply invited to walk by faith. Come, follow me. Faith that this young, innovative disruptor who we read about in the Gospels is indeed the Son of God, and that we should listen to him. Listen to him as we walk in the valley of life and the valley of death. Listen to him as we join with his movement and his cause. For us, listen to him as we seek to invite, as we seek as a congregation to try and work out how do we create more space, not that we can grow bigger, but that there is more space for people to find a welcome and to find the opportunity to experience the kingdom of God. And if in the next few weeks in the congregation we talk about things that are going to stretch us and maybe stretch us again and disturb our comfort, I mean, it won't be as convenient for us at times. We are not doing this. There is no other agenda behind this than trying to listen to the voice of Jesus, who requires us to seek to live in this world and to bear witness and to invite others to share in the kingdom that he has brought. But do you know this? Maybe as we listen, and maybe daily when we decide to follow, and maybe when at the prayer meeting we turn up to pray, and maybe as we support this community in all the ways that we do, and maybe as we're led and we worship together, and maybe as we take bread and juice, maybe at times, if only for a moment, the veil will be pulled apart, and we will see him shining, radiant in all his glory, whiter than bleached cloth. And we'll hear a voice from the cloud, the canopy of the Spirit, say to us, "This is my Son, whom I love. Listen to him." We're going to continue to be